Today I'm going to be demonstrating issuance of a smart card for smart card logon to Windows purposes from Microsoft Certificate Lifecycle Manager, part of ILM 2007. This demonstration uses two virtual machines, which you can see on the diagram here. I have the CLM server, which as well as running CLM also runs Active Directory. It has a Microsoft Enterprise CA and SQL 2000, and we have an XP client machine which has a smart card reader attached to it. If I briefly switch to the server, there we can see I have a snap-in opened with all those services, but for the purpose of this demonstration we shall be doing all our interactive work from the XP client machine. To support the demonstration there are a number of roles. I have a role defined of a security officer who can create a request for a smart card for a user. We have a approver who can take a request that's been initiated and approve it, and we also have a subscriber or the user. They are the target for the smart card. Now, because CLM uses integrated authentication when you're accessing the CLM website, rather than logging in and out of Windows as a user assigned to each of those roles, it's easier for me and clearer for you if I use the run as command. So I just start Internet Explorer and do a authentication as the user in one of those roles which I just described. It might make more sense as we start. So I'm now going to access CLM as a security officer, and that's Alan. So I'm going to start this shortcut. So that allows me to start up the CLM website and authenticate as a security officer, and we can see here the integrated authentication showing that Alan, security officer, is logged into CLM. So I want to enroll a user for a smart card. I'm going to click on that link. I'm going to search for my user, who is Jack. At this stage I have the opportunity to provide some vetting, so we can imagine in this use case that Jack is actually present with the security officer and he's had to present a passport. And OK, so that's the request is now being created, and we can see the status is pending, meaning that this request needs to be approved before it can be executed. So I'm going to access CLM as my approver type person, Mick. And if we go into the requests, we shall click into the pending request and approve it. Ordinarily you would expect Mick to exert a little bit more diligence, but I'm going to go ahead and approve it. And his work is done, so we'll close that browser, and you can see we're now back in Alan's session. It's showing as pending, but if I do a refresh, it's now moved into the approved stage. So now I can actually execute this request for issuance of a smart card. So I'm making sure at this stage there is a smart card in the reader attached to this machine, and I'm going to execute and assign the request. So initially the first thing that's going to happen is that CLM is going to initialize the smart card, perhaps reformat it so to speak, and then what's going to happen is we're going to get a prompt to set the PIN. So this is, in this use case, maybe we would expect the security officer to look away while he invites the user, Jack, to type in the PIN, which Jack is now doing. Okay, so now what's happening is CLM is going off to the Microsoft Enterprise CA to initiate the request of a certificate for smart card logon purposes for Jack, and to inject that certificate onto the smart card. And that we can see now has now been completed. So what we shall do is log out of Windows altogether, and Jack is now going, we can imagine this is Jack now going back to his machine with the smart card. He inserts the smart card into the reader, and we get a prompt to authenticate using a PIN, which Jack types in. And there we have it. Jack has successfully logged into Windows using the smart card. Perhaps just demonstrate a couple of more things, a couple more scenarios where you may want to use a smart card for authentication. let's say for remote desktop purposes. So we want to connect to a server running terminal services. Instead of typing in a username and a password, from the picker here we can select the smart card and just enter the PIN. And so now we're going to be authenticated to that server with no passwords, just using the smart card and the PIN which we've been enrolled for. Okay, so we have an RDP session to the back-end server, which I'm going to clear off. Also, another quick demonstration, perhaps just using smart card authentication for a run as command. So let's say we want to do run as using a smart card. So instead of using a username, we're actually saying when we want to authenticate to this command prompt, we want to redirect authentication to use a smart card. Prompt it to enter the PIN. Okay, so now you can see we've done a run as command using the smart card redirection for authentication. I shall just log out. Before I log out, perhaps one last demonstration. If I remove the smart card, the screen is locked, and to unlock the screen I have to reinsert the smart card and re-enter the PIN. Okay, and that concludes the demonstration. The next demonstration is a use case whereby we have a user who blocks their PIN by incorrectly entering the PIN 5 times, and then the user goes through a PIN unblock workflow with the assistance of the help desk. So the first part is to block the PIN. So Jack has just inserted his smart card and he's going to enter 5 consecutive bad pins. It's 3, it's 4, 5 bad pins, and this time, as well as not being able to log on, it's informed me that the smart card is blocked. So Jack can no longer log on using his smart card. Now I'm going to log back in using my generic account, where I can perform the rest of the demonstration. So the scenario now is that Jack is going to phone the help desk, and in the help desk role I have somebody called Sarah. So again, I'm going to use a run as command. So Jack is telephoning Sarah. Sarah is going to use some kind of out-of-band process to authenticate Jack when he's on the telephone, and then she's going to search for Jack in CLM and click on the smart card representation of Jack's smart card representation, should I say, and now she has the opportunity to click on the unblock this smart card link. And what we can see now is that on the screen Sarah has a one-time password which she's going to communicate to Jack. Now Jack at this stage needs to access a computer which will be able to get into CLM so he can type in this one-time password to help him to unlock his smart card. Typically this would either be a kiosk computer which is dedicated to the role of helping to do CLM tasks, or he could piggyback on a colleague's computer. So what we're actually going to do, we're going to piggyback on a colleague's computer for the purpose of this demonstration. So we're going to access CLM as Vera. It was just another user, not got any special entitlement in CLM. And while we're in as Vera, we're going to access what's called a Kiosk Page in CLM. So this is a page where we're going to paste in that one-time password. So let's briefly switch back. Obviously this would have been communicated on the phone, but for the purpose of what I'm doing here, it's actually easier to do it by switching and copying and pasting. Hi, click next. So now executing the unblock request, and I'm going to get prompted to be able to set a new PIN. Okay, so that's being completed and the browser is closing automatically. If I was to log out, we should now be able to demonstrate Jack logging in again with his smart card. And that concludes the demonstration. So the last demonstration in this series is going to be for smart card renewal, or more specifically renewal of the certificate on the smart card. So certificates have a finite lifetime. In this scenario the lifetime of the certificate is 2 years, and we have a renewal threshold set up which is 6 weeks prior to expiry. So the way this works is that CLM is going to be trawling through its certificate database, and when it recognises that a certificate enters its renewal threshold, i.e. 6 weeks prior to its expiry, it's going to automatically trigger the generation of an email to be sent to the user, the subscriber, Jack. In that email it's a pre-formatted message, and it's going to contain a URL which you can click on to go to CLM, and also a one-time password which is going to paste into the CLM web page to trigger the execution of a certificate renewal. Now we're going to have to play a few tricks here, because we don't want to wait 2 years for the certificate to enter the renewal threshold. So we're going to massage the data in the SQL database that sits behind CLM. We're going to go into the certificates table, and I'm going to go to the very last record because I know that's for the issuance of the certificate for Jack. And I'm going to scroll across to this certificate renewal column, and instead of being in 2010 I'm going to make it in the past. Now what I'm going to do, the CLM service is all the time, every 5 hours, going to be trawling through the database to identify certificates entering the threshold. But because we don't want to wait 5 hours, again we can force matters by restarting the Certificate Lifecycle Manager service. So now the expectation is that a CLM is automatically triggered sending an email to Jack with the information which we discussed earlier. So when that's complete, I'm going to switch to XP, to the client machine. I'm going to, I should have logged out first. I'm going to log in as Jack using a smart card. I'm going to go into his email, and there we can see a message from the security officer. It says it's automatically been triggered by CLM. It's got a link to click on that takes him to a page where he needs to provide a one-time password, which was also in the email. I'll copy and paste that in. And now a new certificate is going to be automatically enrolled onto Jack's smart card. So he has to enter his existing PIN. So CLM is now going off to the Enterprise CA to get a new certificate for Jack and inject that certificate onto the smart card. And when that's complete, we'll just do another smart card logon just to demonstrate that it's complete. So we'll log out, log in. And just to round things off, we're also going to retire the card. So I'm going to log back out again. Log in as my generic account. To retire the card, so the scenario here is that Jack's leaving. On his last day, he's handed his smart card to the security officer, Alan. So Alan's going to go into CLM. We are going to find a user. we're going to click on the smart card representation for the user, and now we have the opportunity we could unblock this card, but the actual workflow we want here is to retire this card. So the smart card is now in the reader. We're going to retire the smart card, which is going to revoke the certificate that's on the smart card, and it's going to reinitialize the smart card. So essentially that's going to reformat the content of the smart card. And when that's complete, that smart card is then rendered useless as a authentication token for Jack. And when that's complete, that's the end of the demonstration.